I'm Hildebrandt. Hello, William.
Hi, Jade.
We're going to begin with a look at the markets, how they're faring today.
That's right. Markets in Europe today so far in the green. That's in part thanks to a strong December from the automobile industry. The market grew by 13%, largely because of sales thanks to Volkswagen and Renault. Take a look at the Asian stocks. They were unable to hang on to larger gains earlier in the day despite positive banking results from the United States. In Japan, the Nikkei down just 0.4%, while in Australia, the unemployment rate held steady in December at 5.8%. Shares on the ASX 200 up 1.2%.
All right, well, this might help bolster the markets. The International Monetary Fund says the global economy should speed up this year.
That's right. And this is some positive news, but it's not all great. The IMF says that despite growth forecasts for this year, the world economy is still fragile. It says that the growth rate is below 4%, the target that many analysts think is needed to reach more jobs in these countries. And the developing economies are slowing down. They've driven economic growth for much of this recovery process. IMF chief Christine Lagarde says that there are very real risks of a deflation looming.
With inflation running way below central bank targets in most corners, clearly we are seeing rising risk of deflation, which could prove disastrous for the recovery. If inflation is the genie, then certainly deflation is the ogre. That must be fought decisively.
Well, back here in France, an increasing number of tax exiles are beginning to hand over their bank account details. Why?
That's right. Well, the French government has taken steps to try to encourage people who have bank accounts abroad to come forward. So far, that's been 11,000 people. They think this is partly because the punishment for having these secret bank accounts abroad has been eased, but also it's just increasingly more difficult to do banking in secrecy. Nicholas Rushworth has all the details.
Some of the money that's been languishing outside France in foreign bank accounts is returning to state coffers. The government announced it was beefing up its battle against tax fraud last summer. And the budget minister said on Wednesday that effort had drawn better than expected results.
La circulaire que nous avons prise au mois de juin.
We invited people in June who had bank accounts abroad to come forward and settle with us for tax purposes. I can announce that 11,000 people did so to the tax authorities.
That is the same number as the last 4 years combined. Many of the people are heirs to estates that include deposits in Swiss bank accounts. The sums concerned are often between 500,000 and 1 million euros.
We have seen a remarkable rise in cases since September.
People are being spurred on by moves in Switzerland and Luxembourg, no longer guaranteeing banking secrecy.
It is often the bankers in these countries who are contacting certain clients to say that they have to comply with the law.
Another impetus is that the French government has eased penalties for those who come forward. Once they prove they have acted in good faith, their fine is halved. The effort is bringing in an extra 1 billion euros to the French Finance Ministry.
Well, let's take a look at some of the other stories making business news today. France raised 451 million euros, selling a 1% stake in the Airbus Group, formerly known as EADS. Paris sold 8 million shares in keeping with the Franco-German pact, which stipulates both countries must have equal voting rights, in Airbus at 11%.
Apple is to refund at least $32 million to customers to settle a case over the way it handles purchases made in apps. The Federal Trade Commission says US consumers were billed for charges incurred by children through mobile and iPad apps without their parents' consent. Apple will now have to change its billing procedure to make it more obvious that purchases are being made.
French supermarket chain Carrefour said its full-year sales were 84.3 billion euros, up 2.5%. Its biggest growth was in Latin America, while the figures for its home market of France were up by 1.3%. Excluding petrol, sales dipped slightly in Europe over the period. Last month, Carrefour, the world's second largest retailer, announced a plan to buy out 127 shopping centers in Europe in an effort to modernize its stores.
Finally, we have the answer for one of the mysteries of last year. Who bought that Francis Bacon piece of artwork that broke all record sales?
That's right. Well, as you remember, it was the 3 studies of Lucian Freud that sold for $142.5 million. And that was the highest price ever paid for a painting at auction. And it turns out we now know who the mystery buyer was. It's Elaine Wynn, the former wife to casino magnate Steve Wynn. She's been married to him twice already, and in the settlement after the divorce, she was granted stocks in his company worth $741 million. Well, she's since put the work on temporary display at the Portland Art Museum until the end of March, so you can go take a look at that wonderful painting there.
That's nice, sharing it with the public. All right, thanks very much for that wrap-up of the day's business news, William Hildebrand. We're going to take a look at what's grabbing headlines in the international press now with Florence Villamilo. Good morning, Florence. And we're going to focus on the opening of a session of the Special Tribunal for Lebanon, which has now, of course, just got underway in The Hague.
That's right. It's getting a lot of attention in the Lebanese press, as you can imagine. L'Orient Le Jour says that this trial is a symbol of the stubborn search for truth and justice. And the Daily Star, which is important to note that it's owned by the Hariri family, says this is a day of justice in Lebanon. And it says that with this trial, Lebanon takes one step closer towards closing the chapter of political violence and unaccountability, even though